Good day. I'm Caspar Spiro and from Easy Generator. Welcome you to this webinar where we will dive into everything about data. And today my guest is Frederic Hebert. He is the digitalization stream lead talent and learning from Danone. And I think Fred is one of the people I know who's sort of ahead of the pack. So there are a few steps further along the road than most of us. So I'm really curious to find out what he learned and sort of share everything with you. So good morning,
Thanks,
Fred.
Casper. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Great to have you in the webinar. Um, Before we can actually dive into, there is like a whole ecosystem emerging in learning. So instead of just a simple learning management system, it's now a whole bunch of tools working together, connecting with data. And I think we should all understand what it is. So what I first want to do is sort of share an image, and maybe you can talk us through that image, what it actually means. So sharing the image right now. So you should be able to see
Yep,
that.
perfectly.
Can
Yep.
you take us
Yeah,
through
yeah.
it?
So, what we have been facing for the last 20 years or even more, it's the rise of the, I would say, domination of the LMS. But what we've seen for the last couple of years with new concept, new platform, new vendors like Degree, Deadcast, and others that have been absorbed or have disappeared, it's the rise of the LXP, the learning experience platform. So this type of new solution that are here to really engage and find, put in place a new approach or a new way to, I would say, consume learning in a much more user-centric way. So with new, I would say, features or things like AI engine. I don't want to say it's a Netflix of learning, but try to mimic some of the ideas that we were using in the outside world for day to day, but having this into the corporate landscape for learning. So we have seen this raising for the last 5 years now. I think it's quite famous outside, especially since we see companies like Edcast has been absorbed by Cornerstone recently. So this is one of the key things that has been in place, at least in Danone. And then, of course, still the LMS that has been very famous. And what we've seen also, and it's pretty new and even not new, but it starts to be a buzzword. It's the LRS for the Learning Record Store. So just to explain a bit the logic and the history behind that, when it comes to digital learning, we have been, I would say, for the last 25 years, and we've been fortunate in the learning industry. It's to have standards, protocol. Everything have started in the 80s with the AICC for, I think, aviation industry, something that has been put in place by the avionics industry to make sure that we can certify the employees when it comes to build a plane. Then we've seen other stuff like SCORM in 2000. So people should be familiar with these technologies. But what we've seen in the early 2010, it's a new concept that are maybe not yet famous for all the L&D community. It used to be called TINCAN and now it's called XAPI. It's a new standard that is here to capture data in various locations, not only in the LMS or not only from an e-learning, so vary from various sources. And this is to be correlate with the logic of an LRS that is here to capture these type of sources. So the great thing with that, it's to be able to capture almost any type of learning data from everywhere as soon as you have a connector. So it's really a new paradigm. So it's having a constellation of application, not only one single application, and capturing all this massive of data. So this is what we are doing in Danone, and also with a tool like Easy Generator that have this capability to also send real-time information to the LRS. So really, this type of combo, LXP, LMS, LRS, it's a new type of ecosystem that is, I will say, rising all across the L&D industry.
Yeah, we see that with a lot of customers indeed. Just to maybe explain a bit more, clarify a bit more. So would it be fair to say that the LMS, the old school LMS is more for top-down learning, so mandatory training, you have to follow like compliance training, stuff like that, things that are pushed to the learner by the learning department. And the LXP is much more for bottom-up learning, so learning initiated by the learner. Would that be a good
Could be, I
definition?
will say most of the company will do it this way. So still relying on the LMS for most of the compliance learning to ensure that you have the proper tracking, even if the LXP can do that, but the LMS is for me mainly now an admin tool, really for the L&D community when it comes to deploy and manage face-to-face learning or key e-learning. So that's how I see
Okay.
things for now.
So even take that one
Yes,
step
yes,
further. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and also the need for a learning record store, which basically is a database for the results, is now because we're learning in more than one place. So not no longer it's confined to the LMS, but there are many more places like in LXP where learning is happening. So then you need to have like an independent place to store the results. So that's the
that's
LRS, the learning
exactly
record
that.
store. Okay, clear. Perfect. Then I will stop sharing my screen and we'll just dive into the question. So um, it means that now with learning, we have the ability to, in a proper way, track and trace information. And also with a data source, the LRS, which is XML based, so it's really open. So that means that we now have the opportunity to get serious about data. We hear a lot about big data and all that kind of stuff, but so I think that what I want to do today is sort of see what's actually happening. So it's no longer something on the horizon, something that's actually happening, and although we're not there, we're getting there. So, if what would be your sort of goal? Where do you want where do you think it will take us in the long run? So, what is the dot on the
To be honest,
horizon?
it's a really tricky question because I don't have the answer yet. I have only the gut feeling about it that we need to go this way. So with a solution like the LRS, we will not talking about only capturing thousand or hundred of thousand of I would say learning insight. So learning insight for me it's not only completion, it could be any type of things related to learning. We are talking about millions on even hundreds of millions of learning activities touch points. So with that you will land to a new world which is really big data. Because when you want to do I would say big data, it's not, I would say, the answers. I mean, big data is what is important to be able to build on that, to have some AI, to have predictions. So you need to have a lot of data. You can't rely only on few insights. So for now, I don't want to say it's just an experiment. I have ideas where we can go. It's later on to be able to, I would say, deep dive into it, find patterns, try to identify things to be able to be more efficient. So for example, just one simple example that I was running with someone in my team is with this type of things, we can potentially predict what we'll be learning tomorrow based on the consumption of yesterday. I know it sounds like crazy what I'm saying, but if you're familiar with solutions like Facebook or what Netflix is doing or whatever, what they are doing, they are pushing content to you based on what happened in the past and try to predict the future with past data. There are a lot of, I would say, open framework libraries when it comes to data that we can use and plug to the LRS and try to do something with that. So for example, I can start to think about, am I good at purchasing the number of licenses for one tool? Because I predict that tomorrow I will have less demand based on what I've seen yesterday. So that's one of the things we can anticipate. We can also think about.
Can I just quickly dive into that before you go into the next example? Because to really understand it, so you were talking about patterns and you're talking about predicting the future. So patterns in data, are you then talking also about artificial intelligence to sort of interpret those patterns and actually make that prediction? Things like Google and Facebook are doing as we speak.
Kind of, yes. We can say artificial intelligence. Sometimes it's much more algorithm, but yes, it's you're using, I will say, programs that have been designed by Google, Facebook, that are open source, and you run this program against your LRS to try to predict what will be tomorrow. So like that, you can after that you have to be creative because it's not something that it's you get the LRS and you have all the answers. You need to figure out what you want to look for it and try to guess and why you want to monitor and look. So you need to have ideas. So you need to use your brain to deep dive into that. Some of the I will say ideas are quite obvious. This one about consumption, be better off I would say buying
Yeah.
licenses for I don't know solution like I don't know LinkedIn, Coursera, or any other suppliers like that. You can be better at managing your budget. So big data will give you to this type of ideas that will make you also better at your budget. So that's one of the ideas, for example, we can do for
Okay.
with this type of solution.
Clear. Okay. So I interrupted you. You were going to a second example,
Yep.
I think.
So one of the other example, it's also something that's quite new, and this is what I've seen with OLRS. And again, it's another way to measure, I would say I don't want to say the effectiveness, but the quality of your learning by using massive numbers of comments, for example, or any touch point that could be linked to any, I would say, learning material. So, in this type of world, you can use comments, you can share, you can like, you can do a lot of things, but it's massive. You can't really look, I would say, record by record. And you have now technologies, and I don't know if the audience is familiar with things like NLP, which is natural language processing. It's basically to be able, with, I would say, a tool or AI, whatever you want to call it, to identify pattern when it comes to massive numbers of comments, like and sharing, to try to identify if the quality or the effectiveness, or I will say, I can even use this word, the joy to consume and this learning was great or not. And then based on that, you can define, yes, my learning was good or not. I need to update it. I need to do something for it because I'm getting a really bad score. And I can do that just by looking at the data. It's not rocket science, to be honest. It looks like rocket science when I'm saying, but I would say in the marketing world, this is done. This has been done in place for the last 15 years. So it's just copy
Yeah,
pasting what has been done
correct.
outside in other field of the industry to the learning world.
Yeah, because that's also the same what you said about the artificial intelligence from Google. So those are things that are already happening, and you now want to bring them into the learning world. Does it mean that we're a bit behind as a learning community in
I don't want to say,
technology?
I mean, we are behind in the fact that we are not doing this. It's also because I will say it's maybe not the priority for organizations. I don't want to say learning is not a priority, but if you're a marketing company, you will invest more money first in your marketers than in your learning team. After that, it's just the learning team to explain to the L&D, to the management team, to the CHRO the importance of data and what we can do. They know about it because I mean, in some industry, they are doing that on day to day for selling their business. It's just, hey guys, by the way, you're doing that for your customers. You can also do that for your internal people. So it's just copy pasting. Use your internal
Yeah,
resources to do that.
yeah, clear. And it also means that we're sort of shifting what we want to get out of the data, because in the old days, a lot of learning managers were reporting quantitative numbers. So I trained this many people and so many people passed, so that means I'm successful. And you're now looking much more at the quality of learning, and also the impact on the work, on the business. Is that
Is it
correct?
correct?
So
It's
that is the big
no, it's
shift
still
behind
both.
that.
We still need to report numbers like that, KPI, because we have some regulation country by country where we need to give this type of information, learning hours, how many people have been trained. So this will remain. But in addition to that, we can now look at others' information to bring much more, I would say, insight to the L&D team to be more efficient later on. So it's just not I'm doing learning and I've trained, I don't know, 1,000 people, 100,000 people. It's also, I've done that, okay, but I still have room to improve because of the data and I can look at other stuff. So that's really the idea behind that. You have another, I would say, angles to see things. It's like the world is opening. You have much more information to try to decide what you want to do, or because you want to fix something, because you have ideas, you see, I would say, opportunities. Having this data will help you to go there.
Okay, understood. So it means indeed, so it's not replacing the quantitative data, but it's adding on quality to it. Is it also giving us an answer on the return on investment? So I read a lot of articles and books on what is the return on investment of all the efforts we do with learning and development in corporate world. So it's clear there is an impact, but it's really hard to measure it. Is that something that would be possible or becoming closer
I
to
would say it's
possible?
becoming closer to possible. It's always been the $1 million question in learning, the impact of learning to the business. It will give you much more information that you will later on be able to cross. So as soon as you're going to do big data, and I'm sure a lot of organizations are doing that for other purpose, having a central data lake, a central database where you have all the data from the company, the capability to inject in a normalized way the learning data through an LRS, because the LRS it's here only to capture this data with a protocol that is defined by the learning industry. And then you have this database that you can potentially cross with the central one, or you can re-inject, and now you can start be having fun to try to see the impact on learning. For example, if tomorrow I can look in my, I would say, learning data set about my marketers or my salespeople, and I can see that there is a correlation on some people in the sales team that are doing more learning or are more efficient in learning with the increase of the sales figure. Yes, I will be able to say there is potentially an impact if I see these people that are learning more, and I see on the other side of the organization that, oh, the figures are increasing. Yes, makes sense. I can potentially say, yeah, there is a learning impact. It will maybe not the only one, but I can now say, hey, guys, I think learning has been part of the reason why they have improved. And you can, but you will have to do that case by case, because you will not have only one solution to do that. For example, for recruiters, if
Yeah.
you train a recruiter and later on I can measure this recruiter as the time to fill, so it means the time between you open a job and you close a job and you find someone for this job, and you can see, hey, it's decreasing now because you have done that. I can correlate and say, hey, potentially my learning has an impact.
Yeah. That is hard to measure it exactly. And so you're looking mostly at learning data and everything around that, things that you're building up with the learning record store, stuff like that, and then sort of analyzing what the impact is of learning. Is there also an opportunity maybe later on to do it the other way around, to sort of look at business data and discover where learning needs are and sort of anticipate on that and answer that? Is that also something which we have
I
down
mean,
the road?
that's I would say that's a good idea to look at the business data and say, I'm bad. Let's look at the learning. Ooh, I'm bad too, and say maybe if I do something there is a correlation on the other side. Yes, I mean, at the end of the day, what is important to understand here, you will become factual about what you want to do. You will have information that will help you to decide and take action. So having no information or just a limited numbers of information will not help you to take any decision. So having this in your organization will help you to decide, yes, I am good. Yes, I can do better. No, it's already perfect, but we can still improve. But yes, at least having this type is one of the first time we'll be able to really compare apple with apples and be really, having a
Yeah.
scientist or engineered way to say, guys, this is how I should do things.
Because you think because XAPI is built on a really generic technology, so would it also be possible to track and trace indeed business events instead of just learning events, and then create like so that it wouldn't be a learning record store, but like a performance record store or a business record store? Is that something down the road?
I To be honest, Casper, I think you're dreaming. Yeah, this time you're dreaming too high. I think normalizing all the industry across all the functions to have only one way to capture any type of events, I think it will be quite complex. But at least what is key for our space, which is L&D, we are fortunate we have this way to capture the data. After that, I will say it's function by function, business by business to find a way to collect the data in a normalized way to be able later on to compare. Potentially, I mean, it could happen. I think it will be quite tricky, but I will say for us, at least having that, which is kind of plug and play solution, it's quite cool because it's really it can help us a lot.
Okay. So if I sort of summarize that, so we are sort of making progress with new technology that we can implement, so you have like a proper data tracking and storage, which allows you to move from just the quantitative data into the quality data, but it will also allow you to sort of start getting insights of the impact of your learning on the business side, and sort of learn from that and help you make
Yeah.
decisions. Is that a sort of a
Yeah,
summary?
and you
Okay.
can also find, I mean, I'm thinking about some of the stuff that I think also are quite interesting, also for the L&D community. And I'm thinking about, I mean, I'm using Easy Generator, so I will say it's also something I've discovered with that. It's having this type of solution authoring tool that you can open to anyone in the company, because this is the way we are doing it at Danone. We are opening the solution for anyone who shares the knowledge. In fact, what we can also discover, it's the concept of what I call the shadow learning. So try to also be able to identify learning that are not being produced or managed by the L&D community, which is for me extremely important because it's like the top of the iceberg. We are on the top of the iceberg, but in fact, most of the things are under the water. And with these type of things, we can also start seeing what's going on outside and starting to say, guys, maybe we need to pay attention to this, or we need to move this, I would say, initiative to the L&D one. So it gives us a way with tools like you, LRS, to start be better at managing this shadow learning that can lend to after that knowledge management. So it's really um, start to really be better at identifying any type of learning, whatever it is in the organization. And I think that's one of the key elements also, having a view on what we don't know.
Okay. So, and what would be the benefit of that? Because if you talk about shadow learning, learning which is not really visible to the learning department, are we then talking about informal learning
I mean, one
mostly?
of the key benefits of that, you will see also, it comes to identifying people, experts. Also, sometimes in organization, experts are not quite visible or we don't know we have experts. We can start also identifying this type of people with this type of solution. For the shadow learning piece, I think it's important because you will start just because you're plugging things to identify learning that is happening outside that you can start also to think about. I need to secure this because my expert is leaving or whatever. So this shadow learning piece, which is not something usually we lock in the organization and we can lose in the knowledge. It's also important. So the LRS and this XAPI thing that will help us to consolidate and have a view on, it's also something extremely important for the sustainability of the company. That's my belief after that.
Oh, yeah. So, but then you also go more in the direction of knowledge sharing and finding the knowledge experts, so identifying them and make sure that you capture their
Yeah, I mean,
knowledge.
I have this image. It's like a flower. In fact, when you look at several, I would say, areas of the organization when it comes to communication, knowledge management, learning, they all are sharing, I would say, the center, which is kind of the solution, what they try to do. So we still have a small frontier between learning and knowledge. But at least if we are putting the right solution in place and we can give the adoption to the, and I mean, not force the adoption because I don't like to force, I prefer to embark people, to embark them by starting, sharing their knowledge and whatever, you can identify that whatever it is in the organization.
Okay. So, and it's clear that it's a long journey from going from a learning management system with just SCORM, tracking and tracing to, well, sort of the vision that you paint where you sort of have insight and all the data and can follow those patterns. So I know that you don't know the whole road, but can you sort of explain to us where you are with your initiative? So where did you start? What were the steps that you already taken, and what would be probably the next step that you want to
So, I
take?
mean, we started, I would say, 4 years ago, almost, starting to launch initiative about having an LXP. So we have an LXP now for the last 3 years that are change completely the adoption of the learning. So we've seen an increase about the way people are consuming learning and how they are creating habits to come on the platform. This also links to the fact that we are trying, and I've pushed a lot for that, to have open learning access. So try to reduce the access to learnings, so less approval, more open and free content. So that was the first thing we've put in place. So of course it's connected to the LMS. And 2 years ago, we're starting to discuss about the need to have an LRS. So the LRS now is in place for the last couple of months. So now we are capturing the data. So we are at the beginning. We have in the team one data scientist that is experimenting based on this data to see what do we do with that. I would say the next step will be better at analyzing the data, maybe having more resources when it comes to deep dive into that, because it's not something I will say magical. You need to spend time. You need to look at the data to try to figure out some patterns, to try to identify things. So we've done an exercise like that last year, prior the LRS, with various resources that we have consolidated manually from the LMS and other sources. And we did that with a marketing agency that usually we're using for selling our yogurt, and also try to identify tribes in the company, try to identify who are our internal customers, what type of people are consuming learning and those who are not consuming learning, also to understand who are our people, like our consumers, why some people have much more interest in learning and why the others have less interest. Because based on that, you can decide what you want to do. So one of the key findings we've seen, and we have called that the learning health index. So it's a correlation between several, I would say, indicators that we have in the company from the LXP, from our HRIS system about performance and things like that. And we identify, for example, several tribes, and the tribe that I was consuming more learning was some people based in a specific division that was specialized nutrition, and it was mainly female that are between 30 to 39 years old. And we see a big gap
Mhm.
between these people, the way they're consuming learning, their habits compared to some other patterns. So it's quite interesting because you're starting also to understand who are your people and what you can do to embark them in the journey. Because if you don't know your people, you don't know how you can sell this learning. I mean, this learning. I would say I'm using this word, this learning. It doesn't make sense. It's much more. Learning is key, and if you are in the learning sphere, you know learning is important. You believe into that. So understanding who are your people, it's extremely key to embark more and more and more people to this journey that will be beneficial for the organization.
It's interesting that the parallel between what we do at Easy Generator, of course, because we're a SaaS company, so there's so much data behind the tool. And we're also basically on the journey to learn from that more, to indeed see what kind of users do we have, what kind of needs do they have, where do they struggle, where do they flourish. You can all see that in the data. You can learn so much from it. But we are also just at the beginning of that journey because, well, just making sure you collect the data and can rely on that data and know where everything has to go and how to analyze that. That's the thing. But it doesn't mean that you're that, well, part of taking data seriously is not only making sure you have the technology in place, but also the people. So you're actually getting data specialists into the learning department, which is a
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
new
Well, I
thing, I think.
mean, one of the first thing I've done, it's also, I mean, having these people in my team that was, I mean, usually should be in IT, but I've been able to have this person. It's also connecting with the pure data team that we have in the company to also have the bridge with this team. It's really being serious about it. And this will happen in any space of any organization. I mean, in finance, whatever, you will need more and more people like that are capable to really understand the data because it's a competitive advantage. So if you're not taking that, I would say your competitors will do it for you. So you need to be,
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
you need to
blind
do it.
without it.
So because if you're not doing that, you will have an issue later on. So you need to be good at data and really also it's not only the buzzwords and what is data. It's really to understand what it means. What does it? I mean, what can it brings value? How does it work? It's it's I would say something that is really important.
Okay. And just one more from my curiosity. We know each other because Danone is using EG Generator now for a couple of years. So that's how we came to meet. Um, so I know part of the advantage of EC Generator is that we are XAPI enabled, so we can actually feed your learning record store with the data, with the results that you need. Are there other advantages around data in using a tool like EC Generator, or is it just the result tracking, the fact that it has XAPI? Is that a key element there?
I mean, the tool, I mean, itself, it's for me, I mean, having the XAPI for me, it was a no-brainer. We needed to have that for the LRS, so it was we didn't have the choice anyway. So I mean, you have anticipated that because, as you said, you wanted to know what's data, so you started to look at what I need to really send the data. So you had that was already in place.
It was just a simple
Yeah, I mean,
requirement for you.
for me, it was, I mean, it was a no-brainer, but you have anticipated that. And having a tool like that in an organization like Danone, as I said, you can really, first of all, it provide more efficiency when it comes to bill learning. I mean, we can have everything in one location and also start to monitor what is going on in our platform. Because usually when you're creating learning by agencies, everything is exploded everywhere. It's a nightmare to be able to know what's going on. Here, at least you have a database, and I'm sorry if I'm saying that Easy Generate is a database, but let's make it, I would say, the image this way. It's like for me, there is two layers. There is the interface that helps you to build the e-learning, and at the end, we'll make an e-learning. But on the ground, you have a lot of data, and I'm sure later on I will try to also absorb and see what you're doing and what other information that are not sent to my platform I can use on your site, just also to understand uh, how my people are interacting with your solution. Does it bring efficiency? Do I'm discovering other information that I was not thinking it could be possible? So at least having this type of thing, again, I'm coming back. You have a lot of data that you're using for you to sell your product, but I'm sure
Yeah.
later on, your data that you're using to sell product could also be interesting for me to get something that is really important for my
Yeah,
company.
correct. Yeah, and we already do that on a low level with the author. So, for example, we use the data from the Learning Record Store to inform the author on how many people took the course, are they actually finishing it? So, not if they fail or pass, but much more information around the course. How long do they take? Which questions are being answered by everybody in the same way? So then they don't add value. So we try to sort of analyze the data and advise authors based on that. But that's just the first step, indeed. So there's like so many value there. So, and what would your advice be to sort of round this up? So if I would be a learning manager and I have a learning management system where all my learning happens and I have face-to-face learning and I sort of, well, do it in the old school way, what would be the first thing to do to embark on this journey?
So the first thing, you don't need always to have an LRS. I think an LRS is something that is quite interesting for the data piece because it's an easy one to collect. I will say most of the major LMS like Cornerstone or other big names have capabilities to also to connect with a third-party platform and collect this data. It's really be open-minded. So just first of all, understand what's data. I mean, the concept of what is data, it's information, could be structured, unstructured. It's a lot of information, and there is not something that will give you with a turnkey solution or manual. Say this is how it is. Start to be curious. Look this data. Try to see things. If you see something that makes sense, and you see some, I would say patterns, or I would say things that are reproduced several times, start to investigate, start to look at that. And then if you have the capability, of course, having a data scientists that are used to run programs that helps you to be more accurate on a large scale. But I would say the first thing is start to collect everything you have in terms of learnings, insight, wherever it is, into one single location. So if it's an LMS, it's an LMS, but interconnect everything your learner are doing into one only one location. Don't rely on Excel documents, for example. I mean, put everything in the same bucket, and later on try to organize that and try to figure out what's going on and be curious. Seriously, be curious.
And you need to have everything in the same location because you want to sort of see what the impact is of certain things in the business on the learning and the other way around. So if it's not in one
You
database,
can't.
you can't see those patterns,
No,
you
no,
can't
of
see the
course.
connections. Yeah.
If it's like any, I mean, it's like in your house. If you're putting something in the bathroom, something in the living room, something in the cave, when you want to compare, it's a mess. So go put everything at the same location and start to review everything one by one. But everything will be
Uh,
near each other, so it will be easier for you.
I like it as an outcome of the discussion. So indeed, take it seriously and make sure step one is start collecting your data in one place so you have the ability later on to start analyzing it and learn from it. And it doesn't really matter if that's an LRS or a data lake or your LMS or whatever there is, as long as you have it there and
Yeah,
can
and
analyze it.
then also don't be scared about putting everything, even if it's not perfect. Put everything you have. Do the cleaning after, especially the data scientists have technologies to do the cleaning for you, but put everything you have. Don't forget anything. Try to have everything into the same location. That will be my first advice to start, be serious about data and then iterate. I have profiles that are used to that. It's now quite not easy, but it's quite normal to see data scientists now coming out of schools. So it's not a new profile that it's difficult to find. And potentially in your organization, you have people that are used to do that. So use your phone, call them and say, could you give me a hand on that and tell me if you see something in my data?
Yeah. Yeah, even at this generator, we have a data team that just looks at all the data from marketing, sales, from the product, and sort of brings that together, and so we can get those insights indeed. So, and that's basically the second lesson that you're sort of teaching us today. That a lot of the things that you're talking about are not new, so they're already happening in other industries. We're just bringing those developments that are already happening into the learning
Yeah,
world.
exactly. You just copy paste. In fact, I'm just copy pasting that works somewhere else that I've shown that it brings efficiency. I'm using that for the L&D space.
Yeah. So look outside learning and look at the examples in the rest of the world and learn from it and apply
Exactly.
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
to
cool.
be honest, it's
Okay.
also the foundation of L&D. I mean, learn outside and bring that to your own ecosystem.
Yeah, that's that is indeed a solid advice. Okay, thanks, Fred, for sharing all this with us. So I hope it was insightful for all the viewers. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Feel free to approach us, and happy to help you out
Yeah.
further
And
there.
thanks,
So
Casper, for having me.
having said that, that's it.